And the latest visual video break coming in from Ukraine. More images of Russian tanks that were destroyed. But before that, let's get you images of the Ukraine-Russia talks venue. That's what it's going to look like. This is on the Ukraine-Belarus border. This is where ending the war will be discussed in a few hours from now. We've got these exclusive images of the venue in the Belarus-Ukraine border, where Russia and Ukraine's delegations will sit down across the table and talk for the first time since this invasion began last Thursday. This is the table. It's an incredible contrast. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the rumble of Putin's war machine, the unending invasion, the escalation in the scale of the combat and the conflict, the carnage, the loss of life, the defense of a nation. And on the right, a calm, beautiful, salubrious table and air-conditioned room in Belarus, where the two countries that are at each other's throats right now in Ukraine will sit across the table and hold those peace talks. Gaurav Sawant is with me live from Kiev. Gaurav, thank you very much for being with us. Also to tell our viewers that India's most watched reporter in Ukraine, it happens to be his birthday today. So Gaurav, wishing you health, happiness, my friend. You're in the war zone once again on your birthday. I know you've spent many birthdays in the conflict zone, but big news coming in about the venue of those talks. We've got the first pictures of the venue where those peace talks will likely be held. A bigger contrast cannot be imagined, Gaurav.
You're absolutely right, Shiv. The curfew has just been lifted and there is hope. There is hope that there will be peace. But when you see people running, when you see people panicking, the reason is an air raid siren just went up here once again. So while there is talk about peace talks happening and the situation perhaps taking a turn maybe for the better, but an air raid siren has just gone up. The temperature right now is -4 degrees here in the national capital, Kiev in Ukraine. And people are running towards air raid shelters because there was an apprehension of a massive missile strike last night. That massive missile strike fortunately did not happen. But just now people are just rushing. Curfew lifted, people rushing towards air raid shelters and saying that President Putin needs to stop attacking Ukraine. Shiv, there are a number of Indian students who are also here at the Kiev metro station. While they took shelter during the air raid, now they're moving towards the railway shelter. They're hoping that they will be able to get to Lviv and then to the Polish border to be able to get out. Because the apprehension is, and look at those pictures, how people are desperately running out of this area. Desperate to run only because they want to be out of harm's way before the next air raid siren goes up. And the air raid siren is an indicator that there could be an incoming hostile, attack from the air. Whether it's an aircraft or a missile, still not known. Whether it will come into the heart of Kiev, not known. But precautions are being taken by locals at this stage. The Indians very, very desperate to get out. Now that curfew has been lifted, it is hoped that taxis will once again start operating. There were no taxis operating for the past 2 days in this city. No metro for the past two days. This city had come to a virtual standstill. But now for the first time, you see crowds, you see people, you see movement against Shiv in a desperate hope to get out of harm's way, to be out of this area.
Gaurav, very unsettling to see people hurrying like that on the road, but I got to tell you that it's still good to see people outside. Over the last few days, Kiev has been a complete ghost town. I'm coming back to you, Gaurav, in a moment. I just want to quickly show our viewers where these talks will be happening. First, let me show you this map. This is what Ukraine looks like. This is Kharkiv, which has been retaken by Ukraine. After fighting with Russian forces. This is Kiev right now, where you've got Russian forces surrounding Kiev. That's the Pripyat River. This is the border with Belarus. It's somewhere here. It's somewhere in this location where the talks will actually be happening. Here, on the banks of the Pripyat River, which flows from Belarus into Ukraine, somewhere near the border. The Russians wanted to hold the talks well inside Belarus. Ukraine's President Zelensky said, we will have to hold it somewhere on the border and they need to be unconditional. So that's where the talks are going to happen. Gaurav, what next in Kiev? Air raid sirens are still going off, people still panicking, but the curfew has been lifted for now. At the same time, we are still seeing damage and destruction. There is still shelling happening. We've gotten images, and we'll put those on our screens in a moment, of missiles hitting buildings in and around Kiev still.
You're right, and that is what the air raid siren was an indication of on ground. And just, before you and I started speaking, I was speaking to some of these young Ukrainian soldiers we've been speaking to in the past 2 days, and both said the air raid siren and these talks, they don't go hand in hand. The talks, according to them, is just a ruse. Russia only wants to reassess its strategy and then launch the offensive, and that is why they are on a red alert. And that is why, since they know us, and incidentally they've been watching some of our coverage here on YouTube, here even in Kiev, and they're saying that since these talks are being held, this will give Russians time to reassess their strategy. Their apprehension is from the Belarus side, there will be an offensive. There will be a multi-pronged offensive from north and from the east and the south. And that is where an attempt will be taken to take Kiev. Whether it will be ground to ground battle and building to building and lane to lane, or will this place be pulverized by missiles and air attacks before the ground offensive comes in, remains to be seen. But they are saying this is just the first phase of that operation. This is the attack phase. Then will come the consolidation or hold phase, and then will come the third phase in which those street battles begin. But before those street battles begin, their apprehension is this modern 21st century city may just be reduced to rubble given the crisis. And that is why, Shiv, you see people in large numbers taking the first opportunity to get out of Kiev, because the coming days could be extremely, extremely difficult for people here, Shiv.
Okay, Gaurav, stay with me. Rajesh Pawar also on the ground in Kiev on day 5 of this invasion. Rajesh, what are you hearing? Curfew been lifted. We can see people finally on the streets of Ukraine's capital at this point of time. What's the sense on the ground? Because the destruction is still happening. The forces are still around Kiev at this point of time. What was the rationale at this point to lift the curfew? Give us a picture on that.
Good morning, Shiv. It was not a really good day yesterday, because after we reached Kiev, it was impossible to find a hotel, and then finally we could find a hotel which was open. There was no food, nothing. I mean, the whole day was without food almost. I had to survive just on coffee yesterday. And as far as Kiev in the night was concerned, we were expecting a major assault in the night. The air warning, the air siren, it went out almost thrice in the night. But yesterday, there was no bombing in Kiev at all. There was no bombs blasting the Kiev. There was no fighting happening. So it was a peaceful night as far as Kiev was concerned last night. I'm not aware of the fighting on the outskirts in the north still going on or not. But since I'm present here in Kiev, I could tell you that the last blast we heard in Kiev yesterday was somewhere 6 p.m. Local time yesterday. After that, in the night, heavy bombing was expected, but it did not happen. And it was calm as far as air raids were concerned last night. Shiv.
Okay, stay with me, Gaurav and Rajesh. You're both in Kiev. We're also getting some breaking news, a latest update from the city of Kharkiv. As a matter of fact, I want to go to that map for just a moment to show our viewers where Kharkiv is in relation to Kiev. This is where Gaurav and Rajesh are. This is the country's capital. That's Kiev, which is Ukraine's capital. And this here is Kharkiv, where you've got Russians who've been surrounding the entire city. It happens to be the second largest city. It has been surrounded by Russians. A lot of street fighting happening in the city of Kharkiv, which is east of Kiev. In fact, we've got images that are coming in from Kharkiv at this point of time. Fresh images coming in from Kharkiv of the kind of street fighting that we've seen. Very fierce fighting has been reported in Ukraine's second largest city. Extensive damage has apparently been reported as well. Not only are people fighting tanks, they're blocking tanks. Civilians are challenging Russian soldiers. Residential areas have been hit as well. We're going to try and get you more details of precisely where in Kharkiv this has happened. But the general sense is that Kharkiv was nearly taken by the Russian invading force. But the people of Kharkiv, the military units deployed there, have been able to defend it and retake it. Gaurav, the battle for Kharkiv rapidly becoming one of the central the central stories coming out of Ukraine. You were there as well, a few days ago. What are you hearing about Kharkiv? Because all the most dramatic images coming in from the war are literally in and around Kharkiv now. Battle tanks destroyed, columns being ambushed by Ukrainian forces, civilians on the streets as well.
Shiv, what we are hearing on ground about Kharkiv, and I spoke to a journalist I'd met when I was in Kharkiv, the video journalist Pavan Kumar and I had traveled extensively across to Kharkiv and to the Russian border, Ukraine-Russian border at Kharkiv. And this journalist told me that disruptive technology has been used by the Ukrainian forces, something that was confirmed by the Ukrainian chief of security staff, chief of their armed forces, when they said that Turkish unmanned combat aerial vehicles were used to destroy ground missiles that were being brought in and also armored personnel carriers and tanks. So the Russian convoy that was coming in was targeted by a UCAV and destroyed. And this led to Russians, according to the Ukrainian government, abandoning their vehicles, abandoning that convoy and retreating. That was an effort to stall the fall of Kharkiv, and this enabled Ukrainian forces to go in. They are also saying that there appears to be a change in Russian tactics. Initially, it was to lay siege of Kharkiv, occupy it. Then there was a change that two of the formations from the units they stayed on, 3 others sped past. So there are some forces that are retaining the fight or carrying out holding operations. The others are moving towards Kiev. How far are they reaching? Because when Rajesh, Pavan and I were driving towards Dnipro on road, that was the time we saw locals coming out on the streets and stopping movement of the adversary in terms of setting up temporary obstacles, roadblocks, checkpoints to stall the advance. And a lot of these stalling operations are going on. Whether they can hold on to the Russian advance for long remains to be seen, but at least they're trying to stall it. And now with UCAVs, they're actually trying to hit the convoys before they come in, Shiv.
One of the most dramatic images that's come in, Gaurav. I'm glad you talked about the UCAV. I'm going to delve into greater detail about that in just a short moment from now. Gaurav, thank you very much for joining me.